don't know if you've ever thought about this, but you would be shocked at the number of people that you know that you don't know. Okay, slow down, rewind a little bit. You know a lot of people, but the people you know, they also know a lot of people that you've never met. Right? I mean, this is the idea behind something, you've probably heard of it before, called 6 degrees of separation. It's been out there forever. It's the idea that you're only a couple connections away from any random person in the world, that somebody you know knows somebody else that knows somebody else that knows somebody else, that can get you to that person, that one way or another, within 6 connections, you can actually be talking to someone that you would have never met otherwise. And so the whole idea, 6 degrees of separation. Another version of that is the handshake rule, the 30 handshake rule. And how this one goes is, if you shook hands with 30 people, okay, and then each of them shook hands with another set of 30 people, if you continued to do that, by the time you had done that 6 times, so not that many times, 6 times, you would have shaken hands, or a number of people would have shaken hands larger than the population of the United States. If you did it a 7th time, you would have actually shaken hands with enough people that everybody in the world shook hands at least one time. So it's kind of crazy that, and social scientists and stuff study all these kind of things about how we're connected and relationships and all of this, but they actually have started to do a kind of a mathematical version of this. And so in 2016, not quite 10 years ago, Facebook took a picture of all the people that had Facebook accounts. And so at the time, I think it was like 1.2 billion, 1.4 billion, somewhere in there, million, excuse me. No? Billion. Yeah, billion. 1.2 billion. And they said, how far are all these Facebook friends from each other? Like how many times would you have to work through the system to get to just about anybody in the system? And what they discovered was 4.5. The people on Facebook were actually a little more connected than people that weren't on Facebook, and that within about 4.5 friendships, you could get to anyone else on Facebook, which is kind of crazy. My favorite though, and some of you guys are going to love this and some of you are going to roll your eyes, is the work done by Watts, and I think his name, and how you pronounce it, is Strogatz. But they did a mathematical formula. I want to put this up because I can't remember all this, and it's so obvious, so just kind of, just hang in there with me. But the average path length, or APL, between 2 nodes in a random network is equal to n divided by k. Right? Obviously. Where n equals the total nodes and k equals acquaintances per nodes. Thus, if n is 300 million, or 90% of the U.S. population, with 10% of the population being too young to participate, and k equals 30, then degrees of separation, or APL, is equal to 19.5 divided by 3.4 is 5.7. Right? Like, everybody knows that. And if n is actually 7.2 billion, or 7 billion 200 million, 90% of the world's population, with 10% of the population being too young to participate, and k equals 30, then degrees of separation, or APL, is equal to 22.7 divided by 3.4, which equals, obviously, 6.7. So you got all that? Right? Yeah. Some of you, and the scary part is some of you are like, yeah, that makes sense. I get that. The rest of us are kind of like, that was high school, right? If a train is coming with a load of bread, and I don't know. But here's the deal. Mathematically, what they're telling you is, within the United States, you're pretty close. Within the world, you're at 6.7, which is amazing. It's kind of mind-blowing. Billions of people on the planet. And if you met the right 6 of them, you could get to anyone, which is just bizarre to think that way. It's a small world. Yesterday, my daughter Marissa married a man named Micah. They had lived in the same neighborhood 5 streets away from each other for 15 years and never met. Then they meet and get married. Which, by the way, woohoo, pretty excited about that. But anyway, no. That's not why I told you that. That's how small the world is, but at the same time, how hard it is to stay and get connected to people. There are people flowing in and out of your life every day, all the time. And here's what happens. Because it happens so much, we don't even think about it. But I want to take a little bit of time today to share with you an account from 3 guys that maybe you've heard of one of them. 2 of them you probably haven't heard of them. One of them I'm sure you haven't heard of. Their names were Onesimus, Philemon, and Paul. Now, for some of you, Paul kind of rings a bell. You're like, yeah, that's the Bible guy, right? He was kind of the New Testament. Yeah, Paul was a convert to Christianity, became a follower of Jesus, and he felt like the best use of his life was to go around the world that he knew, which wasn't as big as the world we know, but to go around the world that he knew, trying to tell people about Jesus and start churches. And so that's what he did. And as he did that, some places it went really, really well. Other places it did not go so well. because there were already other belief systems. There were already other religious things going on. People had their own traditions and customs, and here's somebody bringing in some new stuff, and people are getting excited and charged up, and it's starting to create conflict and drama, and we don't like that. And so it wasn't uncommon for Paul to get into a little bit of trouble. And sometimes that trouble consisted of punishment. It was the ancient world, and so you might get whipped or beaten. It also included being thrown in prison sometimes. And as we come upon this account today, he is in jail, but it's not the jail that you think of. You think of a jail cell and bars and all that stuff. No. He's under house arrest. So people can come and go. He's relatively free to move around, but he can't leave. He has a guard. He has to get permission to leave the house, and if he does leave the house, the guard has to go with him. So he's in jail, so to speak, but it's a little bit different kind of jail, like I said, than we think of. And he writes a letter to a friend named Philemon. And so if you've got your Bible or New Testament or your phone, you want to follow along in the app, whatever it might be, we're going to be in the book of Philemon. And I say book, it really is very short. It's a letter that he wrote to his friend. So it's not a long piece of literature. And if you're trying to find it in the Bible, it's about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the New Testament. It's right next door to Hebrews. For those of you who got a phone, it's going to be fast. So you just Philemon, bloop, and there you go. But in this letter, we meet these three guys. And it's kind of strange because what it ends up is this is a really delicate and awkward situation. See, because Paul was friends with Philemon. He had known him for a long time, and we'll kind of get the backstory here in just a minute. This guy named Onesimus shows up at Paul's doorstep while he's in this house jail. Come to find out, Onesimus was a slave that was owned by Philemon, and we'll talk about slavery too, but he ran away. And most likely stole some stuff from Philemon. And he shows up at Paul's doorstep. And so Paul kind of takes him under his wing. And Philemon's coming and going every day. You know, he's kind of checking with him. And Paul kind of, even from prison, tries to help take care of this guy. And he begins to share with him who Jesus is. And Onesimus becomes a follower of Jesus. And here's Paul stuck in the middle. My really good friend Philemon, who I can't go see because I'm in this jail situation, has lost something very valuable to him. And this man that has shown up at my door that I kind of knew, that now I've invested in, has become a follower of Jesus, is here. And what exactly am I supposed to do? And so while their worlds are completely different, right? Values, customs, traditions, slavery, the whole thing, that's completely different than you. The situation is incredibly similar to yours. It doesn't take too long to think about, are there any kind of quote unquote delicate or awkward situations in some of my relationships right now? For most of us, the answer is easy. Yeah. Are there any situations maybe in my family or my friend group where I'm kind of caught in the middle? Like I care about them both, but they're not getting along, and I feel like I'm trapped in the middle. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do or how to Yeah. A lot of us experience that. Where somebody's kind of right, but they're also kind of wrong, and they're looking at me, and I don't know exactly what to tell them. And yeah. Everybody has experienced this, the kind of drama that comes with relationships. And we see an incredible opportunity, actually, in that situation. And Paul writes about it and kind of teaches us a little bit about how you might want to respond in that situation in the book of Philemon. And so, like I said, here's Paul. He's got this guy that showed up that's a runaway slave that stole some stuff from his friend, and now he's a follower of Jesus, but he also feels an obligation to his friend, and he's stuck in the middle. So what does he do? He writes him a letter. And if you got it, you found it in your Bible, Philemon, we're going to start in verse 12. There's only one chapter. It's not even chapter 1. It's just Philemon 12. And see what Paul has to say. He says, verse 12, I am sending him, he's talking about Onesimus, I'm sending him back, who is my very heart. Big statement. I'm sending him back to you. I would have liked to have kept him with me so that he could take your place in helping me while I'm in chains for the gospel, but I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that any favor you do would not seem forced, but would be voluntary. Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back forever. No longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He's very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a fellow man and as a brother in the Lord. So he kind of starts this off, and like I said, you can appreciate, man, this is a tricky situation. I want good things for both of them. They're both at odds. I'm in the middle. I'm kind of stuck. And so what does he do? He starts off, I love how he starts off. He doesn't just tell him, hey, here's what you need to do this, 1, 2, 3, and he's going to do 1, 2, 3, and then it'll all work out and it'll be fine. No. he comes in with a lot of humility. And in essence, he says, Philemon, man, you do what you think is best. I trust you. I respect you. I want good things for you. I want God's best for you, Philemon. And so you need to do what's best. And he says, oh, and by the way, Philemon, I see God's hand in all of this. Which at first part, I had to push back a little bit. I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, we're dealing with slavery. That's a terrible thing. And yes, that was part of their culture and part of their world. But that's not God's intention. That's not the way the world should work. It was a reality for them. But I'm kind of like, you seeing God work in somebody owning another person? Oh, and by the way, Onesimus, he was being forced to be a slave and all of that. But he stole, we're going to find out, he stole a bunch of stuff from Philemon in the process and ran away. And it's like, these are terrible circumstances. Again, much like you're thinking about that relationship, that situation, you're like, these are terrible circumstances. How could God be at work in this? And Paul points out, well, look what happened. In the middle of the terrible, in the middle of the delicate, in the middle of the awkward, Onesimus has become a follower of Jesus. And don't sell that short. His whole life has changed. His future has changed. His eternity has changed. He has purpose. He has meaning. Everything about him is different now and will be for eternity. Yes, God is at work in all of this. But how did we even get here? How did this even happen? It was about 8 or 9 years before this letter was written. And Paul went to a city named Ephesus. And he did what he always does. He started a church. He began to share about Jesus. And he ran into a man in Ephesus by the name of Epaphras. And I know it starts to get confusing a little bit. Epaphras became a follower of Jesus and was so invested in it and had so seen it change his life that he wanted to do what Paul was doing. And so Paul sent him to a nearby city by the name of Colossae and said, I want you to go start a church there. I'll help you. I'll pray for you. I'll support you. You take this message and you go start a church there. And so he does. And it just so happens that a man named Philemon lives in Colossae and gets connected with Epaphras, who's starting a church out of the church started in Ephesus. And over time, Philemon becomes a follower of Jesus. And over time, not only did he become a follower of Jesus, he becomes a leader in this church. And at some point, Epaphras says, you need to meet the guy that helped me get started. His name is Paul. And Paul and Philemon meet. And they find out they have a lot in common. They both care about their community. They both care deeply about following Jesus. They become friends, and they have this relationship. Even though Paul never went to Colossae to start that church, he gets connected with this guy. And they find out that they kind of have similar hearts for the world and life around them, and they're just connected, and they're friends. And somehow, somewhere in all of that, Onesimus, who was a slave of Philemon, begins to know who Paul is. And so when he runs away and he steals Philemon's stuff, he shows up at Paul's doorstep. And none of this is random. This isn't just kind of by chance, the way the world goes, things happen and, stuff, people, whatever. God is directing people. God directed Onesimus to Paul. And it brings me to a really important question for you. Who is God directing into your life? We tend to think that the people we bump into and the acquaintances that we have and the people that you may meet somebody tomorrow that you've never met before, that it's just completely random, that there's no design to it, there's no purpose behind it. It's just, I don't know, I just showed up and they showed up and here we are. But what if God is actually directing people into your life? And what if God is actually directing you into the lives of other people? We talked a little bit about that last week. What if it's not just random? It's not just a shrug of the shoulders, I don't know. Well, what do you do if that's true? If God's directing people into your life, he's doing it for a reason. And so how you respond to that becomes really important. And I love what Paul models for us. He learns it from Jesus, but he takes an attitude because it starts really with how we think about it much more than what we do. That counts, but what's going on in our heart first really matters. And what if, when it comes to the acquaintances in your life, you made the decision that I'm going to approach acquaintances with humility and involvement? Much like Paul, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't even know why you're here. I believe that God brought you here, but I don't know. Do what's right. I'm going to approach it with humility and involvement. I love that phrase. He said, I am sending him who is my very heart. He had connected with this guy. The only way he could connect with him is if he had an open heart to start with. If he was willing to make room for this guy that ran away from my friend that I haven't seen in years, that I only met one time or two times or something like that, that shows up at my door while, by the way, I'm in prison. But he had an open heart because he believed that God was directing people into his life and him into other people's lives. And that open heart concept really pushes against, for me and most likely for you, our life. Because I know, I live the same thing. You get up and you go to work and you get home and you do your stuff and you try to catch up on a few things, and you do if you have a little extra work to do, and then you go to bed and then you do it the next day, and then if you've got kids, you're doing things and you're taking care of them, and they have homework and they have games and they have practices and they have tournaments, and it's on and on and on and on and on, and never stops. And it's really hard to say, oh yeah, I got time. I've got an open heart to whoever shows up in my life. But there's actually a secret there. And you're never going to find out if it's really true or not unless you try it. Jesus talked about this. He said the one who loses their life finds it. The one who puts other people's interests ahead of their own finds meaning. The one who doesn't live the you, me, my agenda, me doing me, you doing you life, the one who's willing to see beyond that finds purpose. The richness of real life comes with an open heart. This is not a Hallmark concept. This isn't just be nice to people so that they'll be nice to you. This has nothing to do with that. This is where real life happens. And I'm going to push just a little bit. It goes beyond the people that live in your home. Because I get that too. I know the mindset, because I had it too, is like, we're busy, our kids are busy, and I'm going to do my best for my spouse, I'm going to do my best for my kids, and you absolutely should, but I don't really have anything else for anyone else. Because I'm taking care of them, because we're doing our thing. Those who try to hold on to their life lose it. Those who lose their life find it. I cannot live a me doing me life and expect it to be rich and meaningful and purpose-filled. It won't be. I'll eventually, at least according to Jesus, lose it. It'll just be gone. So this approach of humility and involvement becomes so critical when you start thinking about the acquaintances and the people that pop in and out of your life. But it's not just your heart. It actually includes your actions too. And that's exactly what he talks about in verse 17. Take a look with me. He's writing again this letter to his friend. And he says, so if you consider me a partner, welcome him. Again, he's talking about Onesimus that ran away. Welcome his as you would welcome me. If he has done you any wrong or owes you anything, charge it to me. I, Paul, am writing this with my own hand. I will pay it back. Not to mention that you owe me your very self. Not to mention, but I'm going to mention the fact that you owe it to me anyway. Like that. Not to mention that, actually you do owe me. Verse 20, I wish, brother, that I may have some benefit from you in the Lord. Refresh my heart in Christ. Confident of your obedience, I write to you knowing that you will do even more than I ask. In essence, he says, Philemon, come on, man. Let's just be straight for a second. You're a follower of Jesus. I'm a follower of Jesus. That means something. It's not a label. It doesn't mean we go to church. It doesn't mean that we're better than anybody else. It means that we literally follow Jesus. What he does, we do. The way he responds, we respond. The way he gives, we give. Like we follow him. And so in essence, he says, Philemon, I'll go first. If he owes you anything, I'll pay it back. You charge me. You let me know, I'll send you the money. I'm writing this in my own hand. I want you to know this isn't somebody else. This isn't just nice talk. If he owes you something, what he stole from you, I'll pay it. Which you're like, that makes no sense. You didn't steal it. He showed up on your doorway. You're the one that's trying to reconcile things. Exactly. Because the Jesus that I follow, that's what he does. He pays for stuff that he doesn't owe. He sacrifices when it's not required. He goes above and beyond to make sure people know that they are loved and they are cared for. And if that's what he does for me, then I'm going to do it for you. And by the way, Philemon, you're a follower of Jesus, and I'm asking you, I'm telling you, this is the standard that we need to live to. It doesn't matter that nobody else would do this. It doesn't matter that nobody else acts like that. This is what you call us to. This is what it means. And again, it's not because we're better. It's not because we're more selfless. It is because we have been loved so extravagantly, extraordinarily well by our Father in heaven that we can love others the same way. Onesimus, I know he ran away. I know he stole from you. I know you feel cheated and betrayed and wronged. But do even more. Do even more than I ask. Philemon, this is your chance to show that following Jesus is a real thing. It's not a thing you talk about. It's a thing that you do. In my own little, simple, small version of this, I'm going to share with you a couple of statements that are kind of on my mental playlist that go on repeat. And I can't say that I do it every time, and I can't say I do it well, but I can say this. I look back over the last several months, I have seen progress. And I'm encouraged by that. If you have a better method, you use your method. But here's what I do. I have these two phrases on repeat, like I said. And every time I go into a place, I try to run them through my brain real quick just to remind myself. We talked to the last series we did about living an extraordinary life. We said, hey, our thoughts matter, our words matter, our habits matter. And I'm trying to put these habits in place in my life. That when I walk into a place, my home at the end of the day at work, my office where I work, the grocery store, the gym I go to, that anytime I walk into a place where I'm going to run into some people, these two phrases. The first one, and believe me, I know they're corny, I know they rhyme, I get the whole thing, but it makes it easy for me. That I need to work to bless them, not impress them. I need to work to bless them, not impress them. My family, my coworkers, my friends, the guy working out next to me, I need to work to bless them, not impress them. It doesn't really matter what they think of me, and the truth of the matter is they don't think of me anyway. It doesn't really matter. Why do I need to spend time worrying about what they're thinking? I don't, because I can't control it anyway. But if I'm going to put any energy into anything, what if I put my energy into how can I bless that person? Sometimes it's as simple as a smile and a wave. Sometimes it's an encouraging word. Sometimes it's some kind of act of service. I pick it up, I hand it to them, I do it for them, I encourage them, I listen to what's going on in their world, whatever it would be. But how can I bless them rather than try to impress them? Rather than trying to carefully control how they think of me and what they think and what I think is important for them to see about me and what I can show them, what if I just showed up and said, how can I bless you? What can I do to make this moment better for you? I want to bless them, not impress them. The second one, and this one requires, unfortunately, a little bit deeper dive into my personality, which could be good or bad. But it's better to give way than get your way. It's better to give way than get your way. What does that even mean? Not, when it comes to your principles. Not when it comes to your core beliefs about who God is and who you are and what it means to be a person of integrity and character. Not talking about giving way in anything like that. I am talking about not your principles, but your preferences. And here's kind of the weird side of Brett. I've shared with you before, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And so I have a shockingly large amount of preferences around how everything should be done. There is a way to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and if you don't do it the right way, it's not the right kind of sandwich, it's not gonna taste right, it's not gonna be good, and you gotta be very careful about that. If you're gonna eat M&Ms, you have to separate them into colors and eat the colors one at a time, because while they don't physically taste different, they do mentally taste different. So you have to sort the M&Ms and eat them the right way. When it comes to French fries, unless you're some kind of weird barbarian, monster, you eat them smallest to largest in order until you've eaten them all. I have a lot of preferences, and some people would call the preferences, there's a clinical description for that, and it's something else. Here's the problem. A lot of times my preferences, which are many, and I don't mind voicing, and I'm just crazy about sharing my opinion with you about everything, run into other people's preferences that are shockingly different/wrong from mine. So how do I respond when that happens? And I've done them all, okay? I can be a victim. I can try to manipulate. I can try to intimidate. I can argue. I can debate. I can whine and complain. I can do all the things. I've done them all. And none of them work, at least in the long run. And none of them work if your goal is to bless people. But what does work is giving way instead of insisting on getting your way. You see, these are the kind of actions we take when God keeps dropping people into our lives. We have a heart of humility and openness and open-heartedness. And then we turn around and make the decision that, you know what? I just want to bless them. I don't need to impress them. I just want to give way. I don't have to get my way. And when those things happen, here is where, and pardon the word, here's where the magic happens. You start to have these Onesimus moments. Yes, it's not hard to get a delicate or awkward situation going. We can all get that going. But when it actually works out, it happens because you take the time to have the heart to give way, to invite people in. You invite them into your life. You invite them to come with you to church. You invite them to follow Jesus with you. And when that happens, life changes. And all of a sudden, it becomes what I talked about earlier. It becomes meaningful. You have passion and you have purpose. You're not just grinding away, trying to get to some retirement goal or get your kids through college or have one better vacation or all the things that we set up as goals that end up being meaningless. All of a sudden, you find life, and it is rich, and it is full, and it is powerful because you're willing to lose yours. You see, every person you've ever met, every person that you know has something in common. You see, knowing someone is knowing God is for them. There's never a person you have come across that God is not for them. Now you might say, yeah, but they're doing this and they live this way and they act that way and they they're rude and they're blah, blah, blah. Didn't say that God is pleased with everything they're doing, but he is for them. Just like he's for you. He's for them. He's on their side. He wants them to be reconciled back to him. He wants them to have the rich, meaningful, purposeful, passion-filled life we just talked about. He is for them. You have never met a person that God is not for. He is for them. And as you start to think through that lens, it just becomes a little more natural, not completely, but it becomes a little more natural to invite them in. Invite in the people that live in your home that you're fighting with. Invite in the people at work that seem to be trying to make your life difficult. Invite in the people that just are randomly showing up that you didn't know you were going to meet today. It helped me to think about it this way because most of us, the 6 degrees of separation and the whole handshake rule and all that, it's kind of cool, it's kind of quirky, but honestly, I'm not going to meet Taylor Swift, so it doesn't really matter how many people I know that know somebody and all the things, and I don't really want to meet Taylor Swift, but you get my point. We're not going to meet famous people. We're not going to become famous people. We're not necessarily trying to meet somebody that lives in, Bangladesh or something. But Dunbar's theory makes a lot of sense. Dunbar's village theory, and it's very, very simple, and help me get my hands around this. It's a study on life and relationships. And what Dunbar says is that most of us have 5 or less core relationships in our life. That these are the people that matter more than everybody else. And for a lot of you, it's family. If it's not family, it's maybe some really, really close friends. But this is your quote-unquote inner circle. These, more than anybody else, are your people. And for the most part, most of us can't really handle more than about 5 of those. We just don't have the relational capacity. And then you expand out. You add 10 more to that, and these are your really close friends or maybe your extended family. And all of a sudden, that circle widens out to about 15 folks. So some of them are your inner circle, and the rest of them are people that are really close to that inner circle, but maybe not all the way in. And you broaden that by about 20, and now you're at that level where these are my good friends. These are the people I do life with. They might be coworkers. It might be a neighbor. If you're at Mountain Ridge and you're in a small group, it might be people in your community group. But these are the people that I'm kind of connected with and walking with. And then you add from 35 to 150, you add another 115 people. For most people, 150 is about our max. That's the maximum number of meaningful relationships that we can have. And obviously, they're all at different levels. And where he comes from, Dunbar's village theory is, he says, hey, for a couple thousand years, that was the size of most rural farming communities. And most people in world history lived in a village of about 150 people. And that's about as many relationships as they could manage. And so that's where the theory comes from, 150. But if you add another 350 folks to that, that gets you out to 500. And for us in the modern world, that's about the number of acquaintances that we can handle. For most of us, 500 people, that's it. Beyond that, we don't really have any connection with them. Get out to 1,500, add another 1,000 folks. That's the number of people that you recognize. I may not even know their name, but their face looks familiar. I know I saw them somewhere. They're kind of some kind of connection there. What does this have to do with you? God is constantly moving people in and out of your circles. And he's doing that because he's inviting you in. He is inviting you in to a different kind of life. A life that has impact. A life that is purposeful and meaningful and rich. And yeah, it includes some delicate situations. It includes some awkward. It includes being in some places where you're trying hard to see, how is God at work in this moment? But the answer is always the same. Even though they may turn down the invitation, the answer is always the same: to invite them in. I'm going to invite you into my life. I'm going to invite you into my home. I'm going to invite you to come to church with me. I'm going to invite you to follow Jesus with me. I want to invite you in. Because those people aren't random. And it wasn't an accident that they showed up. And God wants to include you in what he's doing, reconciling the world back to himself. And it's so beautiful. And I'll just use the example of inviting somebody to church. But let's say you decide, hey, I want to invite people in, and I'm going to invite somebody to church, and they say yes. The beautiful part about it is it's not all up to you. You invite them to church, and then what happens when you get here? Well, one person greets them. Another person encourages them. A third person may pray for them. A fourth person might talk to them about a next step they could take. A fifth person may share Jesus with them. Another person, after the service is over, may connect with them. It's not all up to you. It is something that we do together, but it only happens if we're willing to fight for them. Just like there was a time you needed somebody to fight for you, this is your opportunity to fight for them. And as crazy as it sounds, the way you fight for them by inviting them in. You invite them in. I want to pray with you for just a moment. Father, I thank you as I recall the people that you used to invite me in. From random acquaintances to good friends to people that I've done life with, all the way down to my inner circle. You kept moving people around. You kept inviting me in. I thank you for that. And Father, the idea that you're calling me to raise my head up out of my busyness and out of my world and realize that you are doing things all over and you're graciously including me in what you're doing. Father, it's a little staggering, but it's also really exciting. And so, Father, I pray that you would give us the courage to not only realize that we have been invited in, but to join you in what you're doing. And trust that you will take care of us as we look to take care of others. It's in Jesus' name that we pray.